we're.
I thought your message was very clear, Terry. So just FYI.
All right, since it's just a committee, I guess we could start.
Well, we can go ahead and open the meeting, and then we can, since we're going to do
Go to
some,
the-
exactly.
Okay. So this is a meeting of the District Operations Committee. Call to order and roll call. That should be interesting.
Director Bragman, Director Schmidt, and Chair Russell.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay. So with that, now we'll go to the closed session.
Oh, I'm sorry, Director Russell. We want to
What,
adopt
agenda?
the agenda, and then we'll see
Okay.
if there's any closed session on or
Okay.
comments.
Okay. Sorry.
Can someone unmute? Thank you. Unmute.
Okay.
Who would like to make the motion for adopting the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Director Bragman,
Aye.
Director Schmidt,
Aye.
and Chair Russell.
Aye.
I don't see any public comment on the agenda, so we're good.
Okay. All righty. So now we
Now
go to
we-
the other one.
Now we can reconvene in our Zoom for closed session. Thank you.
Okay, so sign out of this and sign into the other one. All right. got it.
Yes.
All right, got it.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. There was a closed session this morning with no reportable action. We have now opening the board meeting and the committee meeting. I guess we should check again for any more public comment.
Okay.
Terry, can't hurt.
All right. Here we go. There are none.
Okay, great. All righty. Well, let's rock and roll. Second item. I believe it's the second one.
Seeger Dam, I believe. I'm
Okay.
gonna go ahead. All right, I'll start it off. So over the
Oh,
last.
sorry, we have minutes of the former.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Committee
Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
meeting if we want to go ahead and approve this quickly. Sorry, Kristen.
Sure.
Move approval of the minutes.
Second.
Roll call.
Director Bragman.
Aye. I have to
Direct-
run and get my packet. I'll be right back.
Okay, thank you. Director Gibson,
Aye.
Director Schmidt,
Aye.
Director Kohler,
Aye.
and Chair Russell.
Aye. Okay,
Now we can,
item, go ahead.
now you can go to item 3, the Seeger Dam.
3, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Crystal, you're up.
All right, good morning, directors. Crystal Yesman, Director of Engineering. Over the last few months, we've been doing non-structural spillway repairs on our dams as part of an ongoing compliance with DSOD regulations. And during the course of those repairs, we discovered some voids in the spillway of Seeger Dam. And so over the last few months, we've been working actively to repair those. And so we're going to go into a little detail of what that entailed. And I'm going to pass it over to Matt Steiner, who's going to give you a presentation.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Matt Steiner, engineer in Design Group, and I have a little presentation for you. So this is the Seeger Dam spillway repair update. Seeger Dam is located on Point Reyes Petaluma Road, holding back the Nicasio Reservoir. It was built in 1961. It's 115 feet tall, 400 feet long. In July, repair work began on the spillway. 2 primary voids were identified between joints 43 and 44 on the left and right sides. On July 22nd, after the voids were exposed, Miller Pacific Geotechnical was on site. They were contacted to advise on the voids. Then they suggested draining the pool within the spillway and performing ground penetrating radar scanning to determine the extent of the void. A temporary dam was constructed in the spillway, and GPR, which is seen on the right, the GPR scanning proceeded within the spillway to do the repair proper. As the spillway lowered, additional voids were identified that continued seeping. And so there were discussions then about draining the flip pool downstream of the spillway. To do the repair properly, the voids needed to be dry, and lowering the water in the flip pool allowed this. So between August 6th and August 10th, MMWD staff met out at the flip pool. This is downstream. The top left picture is the temporary dam that was erected in the spillway. MMWD staff outlined a drainage plan. At that point, we also notified Division of Safety of Dams of the repair work involving, particularly because of the involvement of rebar. On August 13th, we submitted an emergency work permit to the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. We also notified the Resource Water Control Board. Between August 18th and 23rd, the flip pool was partially drained. You can see the difference in the picture on the top, the left versus the bottom. That's the bottom picture is the flip pool drained. Also during that time, we received the report, the GPR report, and which identified no voids underneath the concrete surface. On August 24th, Division of Safety of Dams was on site. While on site, they classified the voids as minor and just considered it routine maintenance work. This is a series of repair processes. So the top left picture is exposing the void using hammer drill and pneumatic hammer. And then moving down, this is a picture, the bottom left is a picture of the corrosion. There was minimal corrosion. It was only at the bottom towards the flat part of the spillway bottom, and only on joints. This picture identifies perhaps the worst of it. The corrosion was removed using a wire brush. And if we jump over to the top right, we can see additional rebar was tied in and coated with a corrosion inhibitor. And lastly, on the bottom, low shrink, high strength concrete was placed in lifts to achieve the final product pictured on the bottom right. And in the middle is just a picture of the workers, Majoria Gelati, working to perform that work. And that is a picture of the completed repairs.
So let me add, directors, we're currently working on a work plan for phase 2 of more intensive investigations into the spillway that will involve core drilling. That work plan has been submitted to DSOD for approval. This is all stemming from the Oroville Dam failure that we experienced, a few years ago. So all of the water districts with dams in their portfolio are being required to do some really serious monitoring and condition assessments on their spillway. So this was considered non-structural repair work with replacing the sealant within the joints, and we found those couple of voids. So moving forward, however, we will be doing core drilling and looking underneath the spillways in a sense. So that'll be upcoming work.
Were we able to determine what caused the voids?
I believe just the joints on the concrete slabs had shrunk and failed, and then erosion in those joints. There's another layer of concrete underneath the spillway that was not impacted at all. So it's just the top surface of the spillway.
How many times has the spillway been used since it was put in?
Oh, I believe anytime the dam spills, when we overflow
Right,
the
and
reservoir.
I understand that. How many times?
That's
Well,
a
you
great
know-
question. I can, since 1961, I don't have the exact number, but I'd imagine it's numerous times. It can be several times in a single winter.
Sure, but we haven't had, we've had a few winters that have been that way. Now 61 grinds it back a little further. I have to think about that a little more. But I'd be curious in getting a number, if we can get a count, just to lead us if we ever have to build something like this again. Seem kind of rebuilt it in the same way? Or have you eliminated that joint that you think caused the erosion to occur?
Well, it's also true that the level of the creek downstream of the spillway has increased in elevation since it was built. It used to remain dry at all times, but because of work downstream for fish habitat, there's a sort of a check dam downstream that's now causing water to pool at the base of the spillway so the spillway remains underwater partially. That could have been also a contributing factor.
I would think that would actually help things though, Crystal, because that should start the slowing down of the water sooner when it impacts the retained water. So my guess it happened when it was looking like the picture that we're looking at, where it's completely exposed and you have maximum velocity potential for the discharge. That's what I would guess from an erosion standpoint.
This spillway also drains naturally occurring groundwater and seepage through voids, right? So this spillway is generally wet year round, at least this portion of it.
And do we have any idea what the pH of that drainage water is?
I don't know that off the top of my head, but I can get that number.
Yeah, I think it'd be worth looking into, because my guess is something aggressive got to this, more than just usage. Because it obviously wasn't the first spillway that was designed by these folks. It's a standard, looks to me to be a very standard spillway design. And, I don't know, maybe they all have this problem. Maybe there shouldn't have been a joint. It is kind of at a bad location with respect to the way the water has to turn at that point. It's almost right on the turn, where it goes from slope to flat, or essentially flat.
True.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
slight lip at the end. That's it's called the flip.
The flip.
pool.
Yeah.
It's ever so slight, but yes, it would cause some extra forces there. Yes.
Yeah, it's a pretty minor flip from, if this were designed 10 years or 20 years later than it would have had a much more substantial flip, I'm sure. That's hardly even visible, the flip there. But that's more for undermining the end of the spillway than it is for activity on the spillway, from my experience.
Crystal,
In any case,
excuse me, Crystal indicated that this was driven by Oroville, obviously, and increased inspections and so forth. Can we expect similar issues on our other dams? How widespread might we be anticipating this sort of problem?
Good question. We've actually completed the sealant repairs on the other dams and found no other voids. So that work is complete. So we're good. But we still have this second phase of investigation and condition assessment to go through.
did this sealant contain PCB?
No, this is NSF approved.
Well, I think the PCB ones were NSF approved too, but at the time.
The concrete we put in was Sika grout. It's NSF.
No, I understand what we put in. Yeah, I'm talking about the one that failed.
Yeah, unknown. I'd have to look into that.
I know East Bay Mud had a big problem with it.
Could I ask
Go ahead,
a
Larry.
related question, or just get an informational question, which is the capacity of the reservoir? I'd like to get an update on the latest LiDAR measurement of capacity versus design capacity, because we're getting a lot of questions about excavating the reservoir, which I would like to have a little more data on. So the question is design capacity, also our license capacity from Department, State water board versus the latest LiDAR? Because I don't think there's that much difference between all those numbers, but I just would like to have those numbers.
Yeah, certainly. We'll get that for you. If I recall, our bathymetric studies that just concluded 5 or 6 years ago actually gave us a couple extra acre feet than we originally thought, because we have better technology now in terms of looking at the bottom of the lake.
Right, but okay, and yeah, I think so too. And I just want to compare that to what our actual diversion rights are from the State Water Board, because I think this whole idea of excavation is just, it's a little bit unhinged. And I would like to get the data.
It is, Larry, because as I recall, the 95-17 agreement states that if we capture any more water, we have to release it.
Yeah.
Over what it
Okay.
was in 95. That's what I understand the rules are. So deepening, raising the dams, deepening the reservoirs.
I know. I just
You don't
want,
gain anything.
I want to have my file.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I understand.
So
I think Crystal, Paul Cellier did something on that the other day. He's probably got those numbers. You probably got them too, the ones that Larry's looking for.
Yeah, we can get those for you.
yeah, okay. It's really an inquiry. Obviously, it's not like an urgent thing, but it's just, it's something I'd like to have. Thank you.
Mhm.
And the other thing is, the staff report says no financial impact, but how much did it cost, the whole thing, roughly?
The change order was around 8,000.
Okay.
Alex might be able to recall what the number
Okay.
was.
Yeah, that is correct. Once we get the total numbers for the cost for the change order, we could be able to provide that exact number of what it costs to actually do these repairs. Absolutely.
Yeah, but it's in that de minimis range of, under whatever, 20,000 or.
Yes.
So, yeah, okay.
Yeah, and the nice thing is we didn't have to bring helicopters in with, 20-ton boulders or anything like that, like our friends at Orville did.
Yeah.
So we got on this. I think it speaks to the Division of Dam Safety doing their job. I know we spent a lot of money. I think it was like 200,000 on the spillway evaluations, something like that for the various dams. But clearly you get a big bang for the buck here by eliminating a problem before you have to do it under an emergency basis where the spillway is not working.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, that this is the same technology that the Romans used, in the sense of you build a dam and then you build a spillway, huh? It hasn't changed since Julius Caesar's time. High tech. Okay, any public comment?
There are none.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. That was a great report and great work and very logical. Looks good. Item 4, Pine Mountain, our favorite subject.
All right.
Okay, I'm going to start this one off, directors. Again, Crystal Yesman, Director of Engineering. Alex, if you could start the PowerPoint.
Yes. Share. Let me get that going. The screen.
It's up, Alex.
Okay, you can see it.
Oh, you have
Yes.
to hit display settings to change it from preview mode.
Now is it full mode?
No. There it is.
Now it is.
Okay.
Thank you, Alex. Okay, I'm just going to introduce the slide here. So Pine Mountain Tunnel, built at the same time as Alpine Dam in 1919. We used to take raw lake water and run it down Kent Pump Road to a tunnel that goes through Pine Mountain and exits in Cascade Canyon. The tunnel is still there today. We used to run raw water to the cities, to the citizens. At some point, the warehouse at the base of Alpine Dam was converted into a little bit of a treatment plant where they added alum and gaseous chlorine. You actually can still see the rusted tanker rail car that used to hold gaseous chlorines corroding on the side of the dam, below the dam. But in any regard, in 1971, we stopped using the tunnel and we closed the inlet side and converted to, filtered chlorinated system with water treatment plants. And we use Pine Mountain Tunnel since that time as a storage tank. We actually fill it from the Cascade Canyon side, and you can think of a Coke bottle laying on its side. It's basically a long storage tank. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand this presentation over to Alex, and he's going to go through where we are in terms of replacing Pine Mountain Tunnel, because it has reached the end of its useful life.
Yeah, about 40 years ago.
Yeah.
Quick question, Crystal, are we 100% positive that that old chlorine tank is empty?
Good question. We should go check that. I would think so. Yeah.
Yes, and it should be checked, assuming that it's not empty, huh?
Yeah. Okay.
Just in case, so some kid doesn't come by and open the valve, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. I had lunch with the retiree luncheon a couple years back, and this one old operator was telling me about how he would come to the Alpine Dam to adjust the chemicals, and there'd be a green vaporous cloud of chlorine gas at the base of the dam, which, as you know, is toxic. So I'm glad we don't use that anymore.
Wow.
We had our own Maginot Line, huh?
Okay. Well, good morning, directors. I'm Alex Anaya, engineering manager of the design section. So I'll be providing an update today to the Pine Mountain Tunnel project. I will be covering the project's background and how we got here, the project description, the location, along with the 30% design update, along with the environmental review process. We'll kind of wrap things up with the project schedule, along with funding alternatives and what the next steps are going to be. So district staff, along with the regulatory agencies, have conducted interior inspections of the tunnel, one back in 1993 and 2009. In both occasions, the inspections identified cracks and groundwater infiltration into the tunnel. District staff have been working with state regulators on how to best operate and flush the tunnel to ensure water quality, while the district formulated a plan on either repairing or decommissioning the tunnel. Here are a few pictures from the last inspection in 2009. As you can see, the image on the left shows some water infiltration coming in from the tunnel wall. The center image shows some calcium deposits forming on the wall and the roof. And the image on the right is a hole that was discovered in the tunnel during the inspection.
Have we got the bats under control, Alex?
That's something that we need to evaluate in the process for the second phase of decommissioning the tunnel. But yes, that's something we need to consider. Yes.
Okay.
So this whole process started with a risk assessment that was done back in 2019, which identified Pine Mountain Tunnel as one of the 2 high consequence, high probability of facilities that needed to be assessed by the district and should be prioritized for budgeting and planning purposes. The main issue identified in the risk assessments were the concern over the water quality in the tunnel itself, along with leaking tunnel cracks that were discovered, and the limited storage to the Ross Valley system itself. So in support of the water system master plan, the district and its consultant, Woodard and Curran, evaluated the storage needs to replace Pine Mountain Tunnel and support the larger Ross Valley system. So district staff presented the findings of the water system master plan as it related to the Pine Mountain Tunnel evaluation done by Woodard and Curran that identified the preferred project location at the June 18th Operations Committee. As a result, a professional services agreement with Woodard and Curran was awarded at July 6th board meeting to proceed with the preliminary design for this project. The site that was identified was along Concrete Pipe Road near drainage culvert number 5, which is known as CP5. So in order to meet the storage needs for the system, 2 million gallon pre-stressed concrete water storage tanks, including foundations, site drainage improvements, are needed. The existing 30-inch transmission line that runs along Concrete Pipe Road will also be tied into these new 2 storage tanks, and we'll be installing new 30-inch piping along with new valves and vaults and telemetry for the 2 new tanks. We will also be installing some fencing along with some motion sensing lights as part of the project. And the materials and spoils will be stored at Bullfrog Quarry and other sites within our watershed property during the course of this project. This next slide kind of shows the location of the project site. This first slide on the left shows the project location right here, which is about 800 feet south of Bolinas Road. And, about a half a mile or so from Sky Oaks Ranger Station between Sky Oaks Road and Concrete Pipe Road. This image to the right is a visualization of where the two tanks would be situated, as you can see them in green. And the red line here represents the soil retaining wall that will need to be installed in order to construct the tanks. Since the award of the agreement with Woodard and Curran, the Woodard and Curran team and district staff have been having regular meetings in the effort to develop the 30% design plans. Since then, the geotechnical borings have been completed along with the topographic site survey. The findings of the geotech report confirm that the site has the most favorable geological conditions for the construction of the tanks, which is good. The two tanks will measure 95 feet in diameter and 45 feet in height and provide 2 million gallons of water storage each. There's also the soil nail wall that will be installed as part of the project along here, as kind of previously shown. And the team is also finalizing the pipe and valve alignment along with site drainage improvements. And all this is being done as part of the final 30% design plan. So the next step is obviously for the environmental review component of this project, which currently staff will be filing the notice of availability and notice of intent with the initial study and mitigative negative declaration with the county of Marin and the state clearinghouse today after this meeting. We will also be mailing out notifications to the neighbors after the meeting and posting the notice of availability and notice of intent on our website. The public review period for this project will run between September 21st and October 21st. And the final ISM&D and MMRP is scheduled to be completed by November 24th. So staff will be coming back to the board to consider approving the final ISM&D and MMRP at the December 14th board meeting. And pending approval, district staff will be posting the notice of determination on December 15th. So to kind of summarize the schedule, we're looking to be done with the first phase, including 30% design, environmental, and board approval by the middle of December, which will start off into the second phase of the project, which is the final design and obtaining the contract plan specs and construction estimate by the spring, summer of 2022, followed by advertising and starting the construction in the fall of 2022. All this has to do with the timing with the owls and environmental considerations to the owls and creatures out there. So one of the other components the district staff is evaluating is a potential funding source. One of the first sources we're looking at are the Fema hazard mitigation grant funds. The notice for fund availability will come out later this month. And this would require the adoption of the local hazard mitigation plan, which currently district staff is working on, which should be done by November. If awarded, funding would be available by mid 2022. The second funding source is the Urban and Multi-Benefit Drought Relief Program, which the Department of Water Resources is administrating $100 million for the community drought relief. And there's a $200 million multi-benefit project. I've been told that this project is a really good candidate for both of those programs to qualify for funding. Third is state budget appropriations. MMWD has been allocated $1 million from the state budget for this project after getting some assistance from Assemblyman Levine's office. And fourth would be revenue bond financing, which district staff will be bringing a proposal to the board for consideration at a future board meeting.
What's the capital cost?
The capital cost, I still don't have that dialed in. We're trying to get that finalized with Woodard and Curran, which we'll be bringing back for the total cost.
Ballpark, Alex?
Ballpark, I would say around 14 million. With everything.
It seems to me, Ben, that I know this is a long overdue project, but it seems to me we should shove that construction date out unless we have full funding. Shove that construction date out past at least into the fall of 2022, as opposed to starting it in the winter of 2022, because we're going to have our hands full with other projects. And I don't think this thing really has much impact on our overall operations.
Yeah, that may make sense, Director Russell. I mean, as you stated, on one hand, this is been identified for some time as a high priority project. So we don't want to have too much delay. We do have a lot going on, and extending it a bit does give us more time and opportunity to pursue all the grant funding that we're doing. There is a time once you do get a grant, even the $1 million grant that we got, where you do need to proceed. So we'll certainly do it within that time frame. But
Does that mean, is that grant limited to construction, or is it also for design?
It's a good point. I don't know that anyone on this call necessarily knows offhand. We'll look at that. Typically, it's to support. Well, I don't want to speak because I'm not sure on that.
Well, let's find that out. But like I say, I think you're just building into problems into something that we don't need. This thing, in my thinking, based on Alex's proposed schedule, couldn't hit at a worse time. And yes, this has been a long overdue problem, but it's been long overdue since I joined the board in 2004.
Right.
Can I ask, Alex, are you also looking at, the one thing I'm not seeing on the potential funding opportunities list is WIFIA or, well, yeah, are you looking at WIFIA? Because it seems like that's kind of a perfect fund. And I believe, again, I've been away for a little while now, but I believe that Congress is looking at significantly increasing, appropriations for that.
So what we're looking at both WIFIA and SRF. In addition to bonding for all of our large capital projects going forward. And Director Kohler, we're going to be updating the board broadly on our financing and grant program, I believe at Finance this month.
Okay, great. I just want to make sure I see those as options because these are good. These are really creative and, great on the staff, to be working with Assemblymember Levine. That's fantastic. Good to get some state money in there. But, those are such big pots. I just want to make sure that they remain on the list so that the board can be considering those.
So Alex, when the project is done, will we be retiring Pine Mountain or just not filling it to the same extent, or does it have any impact on Pine Mountain operations?
That is a great question that we have to evaluate how we're going to proceed with that second or third phase of that project to address Pine Mountain Tunnel itself.
Okay.
So yeah, lots of things to consider there.
Okay, and then this would tie into doing a second set of tanks or another tank down on below Five Corners.
That's correct, Director Bragman. The analysis of storage needs showed that we needed about 9.8 million gallons. Ross Reservoir is currently 1, and these 2 tanks will be 4, so that's 5. So we're still looking for another 5 million gallons of storage.
So I thought we were considering doing another set of tanks at Ross.
Correct, that is still being evaluated.
The geotech on that, or?
At this time, we're focusing on this project.
Okay.
But we will
Okay,
get started on analysis soon. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
All right. We've got a few more slides, Director Russell.
Okay, have at it.
All right, so now we come to one of the more interesting, difficult things is actually considering. So
I like number 4.
Well, okay, you beat me to the punch there, Director Russell.
Yeah.
But district staff have been kicking around a couple of names: Pine Mountain tanks, Sky Oaks tanks, concrete pipe road tanks, and Gibson tanks. And I'm definitely all ears to any suggestions from anyone.
Yeah. Somebody's very creative inside there.
I guess another one would be Deet Stroh,
Oh,
as far as
a good one.
names.
That's a good one.
Maybe make Gibson tank 1 and Stroh tank 2 or something like that.
We can give Deet both of them.
I think it's fair, Jack. You've done a lot for the water district. I think that would be an appropriate thing.
No, after I die.
After you die, okay,
Yeah.
well, that makes it more complicated. So we could have a holding name, just put a parentheses there and holding.
right,
Yeah.
To be determined.
right.
Or we could not name the tanks.
Okay. Could be Bofax too.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So the next steps, and just in summary, the district will be in environmental review between September 21st and October 21st, finalizing and approving the ISMAD in December of 21, finalizing project design by the spring, summer of 22, securing project funding in the spring of 22, and if everything goes well, advertising project for construction in the upcoming summer, followed by start of construction in the fall. So this kind of summarizes my presentation and update this morning, and I'm free to take any questions at this point.
And I think that's a great idea up to the point of the construction. I think getting it shovel ready makes a lot of sense. And I, like Larry asked, I'm curious about what we're going to do. I know at one time Mike Bond had talked about backfilling the Pine Mountain Tunnel, and it was a fairly large amount of fill, a substantial amount of fill. Let's put it that way. And then what do you backfill it with? Do you grout it, or do you, slurry something in there?
Yeah, that's
So-
a mile, that's a mile and a half. That tunnel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, millions of gallons, or at least 1 million gallons. So it's a pretty pricey thing. I think we had also discussed running a pipeline through there at one point in time, it seems to me, but I might be a little foggy on that. I don't know. How are we going to get the water to the tanks? I mean, you got to bring the water in somehow, right? Are you going to backfill it from the system, or are you going to bring it through from the other side like it is now?
To the 2 new tanks?
To the, the 2 million gallon tanks. How are you going to get the water? Is it coming off the system?
Correct. We got the 30-inch pipeline right off a concrete pipe road about 10,
Okay.
15 feet away. So that's where we'll be getting it from.
So you just chop the other end of Pine Mountain Tunnel off as far as this project's concerned.
Correct.
So then we can have our bat habitat with visitors and things, huh? We can make it official. I'm joking with you, Alex. Joking with you.
Yeah.
Alex, could another sort of collateral question. There's a small amount of water that's coming out of the top of Pine Mountain by the road.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a concern at all? Is that actually coming out of the tunnel? Do you know, or is that sort of a ephemeral creek? Have you guys seen that?
Yeah, I've heard reports. It's unknown at this time if it's our water or not, but we do have holes in the tunnel walls, so.
Might be worth checking the water and seeing, what it is, but okay.
The last I remember, Larry, it was gaining. It wasn't losing. There were a number of springs discharging into Pine Mountain as opposed to it squirting out. So
yeah, I think the water should be tested just to see what it is, but
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks a lot.
Easy to test for fluoride. Then you know right away if it's us or not.
Or chlorine. Yeah. Okay.
Chlorine is gone. Going through the dirt, it'll disappear, but
Okay,
the other things won't.
You know better than I do, but whatever we need to test for, it might be a good idea to do that. So thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, any public comment? Oh, go ahead.
Yes, Chair Russell, I'm sorry. I'm going to sub for a moment. We do have to, I'm going to see if I can allow Roger Roberts to speak.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning, Roger.
I have a question. Can we go back to the slide in the presentation that shows the contours of the site of the new concrete tanks? It looked to me like that was a fairly steep slope. And how are we going to manage to make sure that there won't be collapse in the foundation?
Oh, so yes, I understand. Can I answer that question, Director Russell?
Of course.
Sure. So during the construction, we will be installing or building a soil nail wall from the top down. So as the construction proceeds downward, the soil nail wall will be holding back the earth above it. So once that wall is finally completed, it will prevent anything from collapsing within the tank site.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Think of it like those medieval castles on top of the rocks, top of the hill.
Right.
So we also have
Let
more in concert.
me ask the further question. If that's if that's friable Franciscan shale, you got to go pretty deep.
Yep.
So we also have Marin Conservation League.
Good morning, it's Larry Minikis. To
Hi, Larry.
Russell, good morning. To Larry Russell's earlier comment about this has been a problem since you joined the board, and to the comment about Jack to wait until he has passed on. The way this project has been going, we may all pass on.
Yeah, right.
I hope we move forward on it, and that's my sarcasm for the morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Larry.
And I believe that's all the speakers that we have for that item.
Okay, great. Okay, well, we'll be looking forward to the next update, and especially on the funding side and grants.
Sure thing.
Okay, item 5 is emergency drought projects.
Good morning, Paul Sellier, Operations Director. I'll share a presentation with you this morning. So this morning, our emergency drought projects update, we're going to take a look, obviously, at the emergency intertie in a little bit more detail in terms of the alignment and how we're approaching that. And we'll also dive into desalination in a little bit more detail than we have in the past. I know there's been a lot of inquiries in regards to that. And we're going to start off, though, this morning looking at and sort of thinking about how do we address the drought in front of us, just in a very plain and in a way we haven't sort of done before in terms of what really are our options. And we'll start that off with conservation before running through the rest of this agenda and closing with the next steps. So with that, in front of us with the drought and should it continue, really we have 3 options that are available to us. There's conservation, the intertie project, and desalination. And yes, there are a plethora of other ideas that folks have had, ranging from excavation to fog harvesting, and of course, recycled water options. And really, we need to focus in terms of what can we do now for this current drought. So excavating reservoirs, even if you could do that, and were it practical to do so, it might not help us if it doesn't rain and fill up the reservoirs. But just touching on the excavation, in terms of if we wanted to get 1,000 acre-feet out of a deeper reservoir, say at Nicasio, add 1,000 acre-feet to it, that's going to take about 1,600,000 cubic yards of dirt to be moved. That's over 40,000 40-yard dump trucks to remove it. I don't know really where we would be able to put that dirt. And then when you look at the cost of that, I think one of our more recent projects where we did a fair amount of excavation, we were looking at $45 a cubic yard. If you do that math, it's about $72 million for 1,000 acre-feet in Nicasio Reservoir. And then adding to that, unless we really had permission from the State Water Resources Control Board to enlarge our diversion at Nicasio, we would in fact be required to release that water. So it would require new water rights on top of those complications. So I don't want to dwell too much on that, but fog harvesters, just quickly ticking that one off, they're a good option for very small water supplies. So it really doesn't scale well to the need that we're looking at. And of course, recycled water, it's not a short-term option for us. So then,
Paul, can I ask you really quickly that's a great explanation. I think we've heard that from you before. I think it's great that you keep coming back and reminding us and the public. Can you confirm that that all of these points that you just made are also included in the FAQs that are on the website? I don't know if we've reached out recently with a direct mailer to the public, because I understand that these questions are going to keep coming up because not everybody, hears everything at the same time. So I think it's fine, but I think it's really important that what you just said and the explanation you just gave about the cost and the feasibility for those options is very, very available, not just, certainly on the website, but also that we're being very proactive in getting that out to the public. So can you speak to that just for a minute?
we'll take that as direction.
Okay.
At this point.
And if I could just very briefly on that point, note that we are scheduling and planning for some webinars or public forums, workshops, where we'll be able to get into a good amount of detail and answer all the questions the public has. And the thought at this point is the initial one will be on water supply and conservation, followed by a workshop on kind of these projects that would augment our supply. So not that that will be the only way we'll be communicating, but it's a way to enhance our outreach and providing the details that folks seem to be looking for on some of these.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that these questions keep coming up, and that's totally reasonable. I just want to be sure that we are not in reactive mode, you know, that we have the information. There are reasons we're pursuing some options and not others. There's strong reasons. And I think we just need to be very, very clear and make it really as easy as possible for people to access that information.
Understood.
Okay.
Yeah. So this table in front of us identifies the three main options that we have before us in the short term. And then just very lightly in the way to start the discussion really in terms of, right, some high level pros and cons. In terms of conservation, of course, it's great that we build that in and now we've got those savings forever. And, you know, there's no major capital cost project that we have to get through some complicated permitting process. But on the con side, there is some question about certainty in terms of what level of conservation can we reach and within what time frame, and that relates to how well can we really use conservation as a short-term planning tool. Are we guaranteed to get that X amount of water that we want to save? Of course, the Intertie project, you know, it's diversification that provides us access to a wide range of different water resources, you know, basically throughout Northern California, ranging from any future desalination plants in the Bay or the Bay Area that may come about to opportunities to participate in ASR in different locations and, of course, water transfers directly. So there's a resilience there. On the cons, of course, this is a high capital cost project, and we're still dependent on others, right, for those transfers, for their goodwill in working with us. And then desalination, it's a proven technology throughout the world. Of course, Marin Municipal has gone through its own pilot study in 2005, 2006. In terms of a water supply, it's pretty secure in that we hope anyway, the bay will always be there and the ocean will always be there. Again, cons, it's a very high capital cost. In this particular response that we're looking at, it's a likely temporary facility. And of course, it's limited in capacity in that it can't deliver in the volumes that we would like it to in the short term.
I think you should also indicate, Paul, that as far as our bay side is concerned, we'll always be on the wrong side of the bay also.
Yeah, right.
With respect to sediment.
Okay, so just taking a quick little dive into the conservation angle, as it were, this is our continuing efforts to reduce demand, right? We're going to hear about penalties, and the board will be maybe taking action in regard to that for excessive use of water on Tuesday. And similarly, on Tuesday, we'll hear about some best-in-class additional measures and opportunities for both near and long-term demand reduction. And we're developing drought rates right now, and the date that those will be brought to the board sometime in the near future. But it does bring up a question that we all are asking, and what would it take, right, to conserve through the drought? Assuming conservation was our only tool, what would it take? So let's take a look at some of the assumptions that go into that. The calculation that's here for us right now. December 1st, we're looking at projecting it having probably less than, but let's say 25,000 acre feet in the reservoirs. If we had reservoir inflows of about 10,000 acre feet, which are twice what we received in 2020-21, And remember, when we've had multiple dry years, it takes a little more runoff to get that amount of runoff, if that makes sense. There's sort of a dry year effect where the ground is so dry, it takes a little bit longer to saturate to generate runoff. So let's assume we get 10,000 acre feet into the reservoirs and that we're still able to pull 4,000 acre feet from Sonoma. And that we get approval for the TUCP and some relief of 2,000 acre feet for that project. That would reduce our stream releases to about 8,000 acre feet. Then we would need to squeeze demand down to 8,000 acre feet, about a 35 GPCD. But if we wanted to be certain that we would achieve that, there's a compliance factor that we would apply. And I've just arbitrarily, I think it's a good guess, I guess, of a 70% compliance rate, which I think is high. So 35 gallons, I'm really asking for folks to conserve 25 gallons per capita per day, and reflecting around a 70% reduction for baseline. We would want that to occur by December 1st of this year. And then looking at evaporation, normally evaporation when our reservoirs are full, we're in the 4,500 acre foot range for evaporation. But because if we assume the drought continues, our reservoirs will be much lower in capacity. And so I'm estimating about 2,000 acre foot of evaporation there. When you add these numbers up in blue, the 25 and the 10 and the 4 is 34,000, and then you subtract away the demands, it shows us arriving December of 2022 with just 21,000 acre feet. And remember, these are projections. So if we release more water, then of course this number changes. And similarly, if we get more water in terms of runoff, this number would change. So there are a lot of assumptions obviously built into these, but it's just a way to show if we have another drastically dry year, this is what the calculus is for conservation. So we're looking for a GPCD target somewhere in this range between 35 and 25 gallons per capita per day.
Paul, a question in your assumptions here. So you ran this analysis so that we would end up with roughly 21,000 acre feet on December 1.
I ran the, yes.
So I guess that's
not wanting to be much worse off than we are today. Sorry, Director Schmidt.
Yeah, no, I mean, we never want to be worse off than we are today, but that's, I guess, we're asking ourselves, are we, leaving ourselves with 21,000 acre feet, next year, is that, that is at the start of the winter. We should like to think that, again, like we have to assume it is going to rain at some point to some degree. That 21,000 acre foot floor that we're trying to maintain for next year is I think a big driver of the decisions that we're considering right now, in terms of future projects. So I don't know if there's, I just want to flag that. I don't know, I can't speak to whether that's wise to be driven by that number or whether dropping it lower changes things. But when I look at some of the projects that we're looking at, like the intertie, versus whether there is another option of conservation to get us through more of the year and to avoid the need to spend, potentially, $80 to $90 million. I just want to test that question with others to say, should we be driven by that number? Because it might make the potential for conservation to help us get through more of the year. I'm not sure there's an answer to that question, but anyway, I want to maybe just flag that.
Yeah, I mean, I offer some discussion and maybe others will join in. I think the challenge is at December 1st, much less than this number, were it not to really rain in a substantial way, you leave yourself quite vulnerable to April, or entering April with a lower, a relatively, if you have a similar year to 2020 and 2021, and we recognize that that's a low percentage chance, that's nobody's saying that it's a high percentage chance. It's just that droughts happen to, we know droughts come, and they seem to come in twos and threes. Anyway, it's just reflecting that from an operational basis, this 21,000 and 25,000 acre feet do not make me feel comfortable.
Yeah, no, that's me either.
To throw that out there, but that's not.
Well, I concur with that. I would say, I mean, we can certainly plan with any assumption the board directs us, but to put a plan in place that may bring us to the same place we are the following December that we're likely to be at this December seems a tough assumption from a planning level, because we'd essentially be planning to maintain the level of kind of crisis that we find ourselves in. So it does feel like that would be tough to do. I mean, to me, we should be planning for 30 or 35,000 for December 2022, in context of having a bit of breathing room and not being in the same level of kind of crisis that we find ourselves in today, and uncertainty.
Ben, we're currently at what, 100 gallons per capita per day?
Yeah, a bit less. What we're around, yeah, I'm sorry, capita, I thought you meant, never mind, acre feet loss of our system.
No, I saw your numbers are like 80. We've dropped down from 100, which is good.
Right,
but,
right.
We're at 100 GPCD and we have to get to 35. We can't even get below 100.
Well, we got there. I mean, we're still at the beginning, and is the 30,
absolutely.
And is the 35 GPCD? And I'm sorry, Ben, I'm a little surprised by that number, because we were at 124, just earlier this year. So, we've definitely made some progress. Our biggest program didn't even go into effect, the Cash for Grass program, until June. So, we do have to give the programs an opportunity to work and find their way into the community. And I think we probably need to put more money behind them. We probably need more resources. Right. I think one thing that concerns me about this. So first of all, I agree with everything that you just said, and Paul, with your, this is really helpful. But I think one thing that I would be concerned about is that when people hear conservation, they think we're asking them to turn off the shower, or turn off the water when they're brushing their teeth, or take shorter showers, which is of course fine. But I think we're talking about something fundamentally different, which is long-term investments in efficiency and in reuse. And I'm not sure people see that when they see the word conservation, right? So I would just be clear that we're talking about permanent investments in reuse and in efficiency. We're not just looking for behavioral changes.
Right. It's a really
good point. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and I think maybe using terms like demand reduction, something that reflects something more than turning the water off when we brush our teeth.
Yeah, because these really are supply options, and because they are permanent. They do fundamentally change, our demand profile. So, right. But that said, I think your point, Ben, that we want to be shooting for closer to 30 by December 2022 is correct. So yeah. So are you saying with this, Paul, that that this scenario assumes that we get to 25 GPCD? Because that seems, is that full, or is that just indoor? Help me understand what that number is.
Yeah. So the GPCD is a 70% reduction from our normal water use. So
what if I could, what this slide is really doing is saying, let's look at conservation alone under these different assumptions and what that would look like. And the challenge with conservation alone is, as President Kohler, you just noted, and we're talking about that demand reduction via conservation is a long-term effort of behavior change, and relying on it in the short term does bring in risks, because at the end of the day, even if we establish a very strict allocation, what do we assume is the level of compliance we would get from that? Is 70% even reasonable? And what's the time frame that it would take to get there? Every month we don't get there requires a lower GPCD to be imposed. So looking at this, it feels like, but it's a very significant decision, and this is obviously an ongoing discussion, excuse me, but it feels like just from an analytical standpoint that this would be a rough direction. And in part it's, that we're on bi-monthly billing. So even once we were to impose something like this, we wouldn't know the level of individual compliance and be able to enforce for 8 weeks subsequent to the action. So just from a timing standpoint and a risk management approach, it feels like a rough direction to go.
And Paul, just to be clear, your reservoir inflow, you're assuming 2 times the runoff of our previous year. So you're assuming a wetter year than the year we went through.
That's correct.
Got it.
Yeah. Could I just say briefly, what we're facing is unpredictable and could be imminent. So we don't have the luxury of time. And I think that unfortunately has to drive some of our planning. And it clearly is with the escalated timeline that we're looking at as far as a pipeline or any of the other options. So I think folks need to understand that some of our long-term options, including conservation, which is our best option and our most efficient option, we may not have the time to get there given our supply situation. So I do understand that, and that's a real concern, because once we get below a certain level, say 10,000 in storage, we're going to be looking not only at supply but quality of water that remains. So these are serious considerations, and I think where staff is going. I do not favor tapping into the Bay Delta, but as far as our options in the time that we have, everything's got to remain on the table.
That's well put. I think this is a very optimistic view that you're making, Paul. I think the idea that getting twice the runoff, first of all, there's no statistical basis for it at all. We have no data with climate change incorporated. And the second thing is, you talked about it earlier, we're going to lose the first 6 to 10 inches of rain to soil. So, the likelihood of getting double that number, I think it's probably a feasible number, but it's unlikely, especially in early, if we have anything even similar to what we have right now, and we lose that first 10 inches or first 6 inches of rain, I think the chances we may get less than we get this year.
Well, Paul, could you explain that a little bit? I was wondering about it as well. What's the basis? Obviously, it's a projection, but you guys are smart. So tell me what the basis is for that.
So what we saw in the concept is that when you have multiple dry years, as we've just experienced, obviously the soil is that much drier than it ever would be. And so we look back through our records, and this is something that's being looked at across the state. So it's not something that we can, take credit for by ourselves. So this is a phenomenon that's being looked into across the state. We tried to quantify it by looking at what happened in 76, 77. And what we saw in 76 was 8,000 acre feet or so of runoff. And in 77, they saw 4,000 acre feet of runoff. And the rainfall was very similar for those 2 years. So we saw some effect. And that's one data point. And then we saw a similar again in, I think, in the drought of the 90s. So, and in 2020 and 2021, right, both very similar rain years. In the 2020 water year, we got almost 14,000 acre feet of runoff. And this most recent water year, 21, we saw 5,000 acre feet of runoff. So it's just a couple of data points that we're working with, and it's hard to say, you know, if you get 40 inches of rain, does it still apply? But there's some effect, it does seem, that would, especially in the lower rainfall years, where you're gonna, as Director Russell said, you're gonna sort of effectively lose some amount of the first rains. And what that is really difficult to quantify. And we're gonna work with ESA, is going to be taking a look at that and see if there's a way for us to quantify it a little better than the sort of touchy-feely, tummy rubbing, as Director Russell would like to say, approach that we've just heard.
I think we should be talking to UC Davis too.
Well, I mean, I think the fact is, folks, we're not going to know, and we've already have been assuming the worst so that we're not caught without options. And the other part of this is that we will know a lot in 4 months and 5 months and 6 months as we actually get into the rain season. So I think at this point, we're running with our assumptions that of a worst case scenario so that we don't run out of water supplies, and we have backup options, and that's what we just have to keep running with. I think honestly that the way that to look at what we are considering here and these options, and I guess I need to say right now is that I've got a hard stop at 11 o'clock this morning, but is that, you know, we should be knowing that we're going to continue to, as we get into the winter, that we're going to take into account what happens. If we don't see any rain, we're going to have played our worst case scenario, and maybe it'll be even worse than what we've seen before. We might also get, you know, early storms that significantly improve our water outlook. That might change the way we approach the future. But I think for the time being, we assume the worst case because that's the most prudent and conservative thing to do. But I hope that as we do lay the foundation for our plan to move forward, that we take into consideration that we'll learn a lot and things could substantially change, hopefully for the better in the coming months.
Have you guys, Paul, been following Daniel Swain? He's sort of the whiz kid from Stanford.
I haven't been following him directly, but I do know the name.
Yeah, Director Gibson and I attended a seminar with him, and you know, it's very unpredictable. He said averages mean nothing. You know, we can be in drought and then be in flood like they've been in Southern California. So, you know, it's the new abnormal, and it's very unpredictable. So again, you know, we don't have the luxury of time, and I mean, I think that really puts constraints on our planning options. That's not to say we implement them, but as far as planning and being ready, you know, I think we've really got to pursue the most practical path forward under the worst case scenario, and we'll see if we have to implement.
Please, he's from UCLA, not from Stanford.
I think he started at Stanford, but
his education.
Yeah, but he's very, he's kind of the new wave of meteorological science. So
yeah.
Yep.
Okay, I think good discussion there. I'll move on to the next topic if that's okay. So we are doing other things as well. We're working with Sonoma, and I have another slide or two on that. And of course, we're continuing to keep tabs and work on the sort of backups to the backups, truck, rail, and barge in terms of availability, cost, and capacity. And I would note that right now it's looking optimistic that you'll see some board actions in the near future on Castania coming up, and I understand the schedule is showing that to be tentatively available for us in operations by mid-February next year. In terms of partnering with Sonoma, the concept there is Sonoma Water identified that during precipitation events, there can be increases in flow in the river beyond the stream flow requirements between the months of October and May. And precipitation is key because the excess flow cannot come from storage. If there's a precipitation event that were to occur in October, for example, of this year, or November, and there were excess flow in the river, then that flow would be available to be withdrawn into the system. And their analysis to date shows that during a normal or weather or wet period, there could be as much as 10,000 acre feet available above our normal deliveries. In dry weather or drought conditions, their data seems to indicate about 1.1 thousand acre feet that could be available.
So Paul, just for clarity, I believe, but you can speak to it, that this concept hasn't been brought to the other contractors within Sonoma. So we don't yet know if there is X thousand acre feet, how much of that would necessarily come to us, or would the other contractors want some of it? Never mind the regulatory aspect of doing something like this.
Yeah, exactly what he said. No, that's true, Ben. It hasn't really been daylighted in that way, to my knowledge, to the other contractors. And of course, they could be interested in accessing this water as well. We just simply don't know, but this is just what the analysis shows. If it were available to us exclusively, that this is the sort of numbers we could be looking at gaining. And it's really, there's no infrastructure requirements, there's no permit needs. It's just, we just need to be on our game and access that water. So communicating with Sonoma, and they've been great to work with, and we actually have meetings next week on this subject to follow up a little bit more on this. But what is interesting is this larger number that during the sort of wet and normal weather period, the 10,000 acre feet, which does seem to indicate that this longer term aquifer storage and recovery, where during these normal and wet years, you can store that water in an aquifer, it might be a good fit for us. Mm-hmm. Now, what we don't know in terms of that type of a project is what the cost is, what the capacity of the aquifer is to store the water and for us to draw the water out. And then, as Ben indicated, how is that water allocated among the other contractors? Who's interested other than MMWD to participate in this type of a project? All of those details, stay tuned as we work through those, but this is a little bit longer term.
And Paul, this again, is there any chance that the current curtailment assumptions that we're making about deliveries from Sonoma are, that's, you're assuming 4,000 acre feet under the current curtailment? How likely is it that would be the curtailment in a dry year next year?
Yeah, so I heard Don Seymour from that agency on their, I think it was a CBS interview the other day, saying that, Lake Mendocino may be going dry by December sort of thing. And that's going to be a disaster for them on the proportions of Ida, right? It's just, there's a lot of people depending on water from Mendocino. And so the agency's going to have to respond there somehow. Of course, for us, our water is Lake Sonoma. And as Lake Sonoma approaches, it's, 112,000 or less acre feet right now. And as that dips below the 100,000 acre foot mark, there's an automatic trigger for additional curtailment. Currently, the partners are curtailed to 20%. And once that lake goes below 100,000, we'd be curtailed to 30%. And of course, we just had the lengthy discussion on our inability to predict what's going to happen through the course of the winter. If that were to fill back up again, it really depends, you know, if Mendocino fills back up again as well. So it's difficult to say what the future holds in terms of our curtailment. So again, from a planning perspective, you're right. I don't think it's the worst, most conservative. You know, it could be lower than 4,000 acre feet that we might get from Sonoma.
Paul, do we have a timeline on the groundwater agency's study on groundwater capacity? I mean, that seems to be, to me, the most important variable here.
It is an important one. Cost is too. I think Director Russell's pointed out that, you know, if there are 10 to 12 wells that are, you know, $7 million a pop, that can be an expensive project as well. I don't have a date for that. That was an element of their resiliency planning study that they were doing, and that was, I think, targeting the end of next year. They have accelerated that component of the groundwater. And we recently, within the last month, had a meeting with that team and provided them access to our model to help them understand how groundwater might be able to assist us. So they're working through it. I don't know the exact time when they'll have an estimate for that.
And will it include the Petaluma groundwater basin too?
I think so, yes. Yeah, it's an overall resiliency effort, and groundwater is a component of that.
Yeah, I mean, that just seems to be the best fit if we could make it work. And again, time is, we don't have the luxury of time.
Right.
So that is really is driving the decision, it seems like to me.
And we do have options that we'll be exploring. You know, conceivably, we could partner directly with Petaluma on the Petaluma aquifer. So if the larger regional effort on the Santa Rosa Plain aquifer for some reason is not moving forward, or there's a lot of straws in that capacity. So there are options. There's 3 aquifers, but the large one is the Santa Rosa Plains, and there's Petaluma, and a small one in Sonoma, which probably is not a fit for us.
Well, it's good to hear it's moving forward, and there's a conversation going on. That's that's good to hear.
I know we're very focused on drought and a lot of drought activities, but there are some things happening as well that we don't talk about a lot. And one we really haven't gone into in a great deal of detail is this concept of rapid deployment for a desalination system. You know, the picture in the upper right shows the units. There are about 13 containers, and you just add water, right? It's not quite that simple, but they are prefabricated and designed to be shipped. The company that we're working with is based out of Australia, and they have a process whereby they have one of these plants ready to ship within 10 days anywhere around the world. So schedule-wise, they feel comfortable being able to meet our needs. You know, our pilot plant shown in the photograph below that you may remember proved that the technology can be used to make drinking water from the bay, and that it's safe. The total capacity number for the desalination has gone up a little bit. The Osmoflow folks have another plant coming off lease that we would be able to get. It's looking now at about 5.4 million gallons per day would be available. And, you know, it's conceivable we could add to that with a Suez plant of about 1.6 if we decided to go in this direction. So, but, you know, the more plants you start adding, it becomes a complicated operations process. In any case,
what about the front ends? You mentioned you were looking at a membrane to remove the sediment. These plants don't include that, I presume.
They do. They're full UF RO treatment process.
And their UF is suitable for the sediment that we have to deal with in the bay?
Yeah.
Okay,
The same UF that we piloted.
okay.
However, right, there's no free lunch anywhere these days, it doesn't seem like. And of course, Osmoflow, we're not the only potential customer for the desal plants. There are folks all over the Middle East. You know, they deploy these things at construction sites. So in the middle of the desert on the coast, they're making a new city and they've got, you know, a few thousand workers and they need water for process and for drinking. And that's what these plants get shipped out to. And it turns out NEOM, which is a large construction state contractor for for Saudi Arabia, is in the process of looking at renting or leasing this very same equipment that we're looking at. So if we just at some point decide that you know the board wanted to pursue desalination, not too far off, you know, maybe end of October, we don't know exactly, there would need to be some sort of an agreement with a financial commitment.
So, Paul, what's the deployment time? If we, you know, we've been sort of focused on needing to have something online by June or July of next year. If we continue that, what's the time to deployment, and what's the numbers have been shifting a little? What is the approximate cost?
Yeah, so as we added the capacity, we've got a couple more slides on that. I know you've got to go, so I'll whip through these, but to give you an idea that the cost has gone up maybe $5 million, something like that, by adding in more capacity. And in terms of the time, we feel that we should be able to do this. We can certainly get these plants delivered here before July, and it's a matter of constructing the sort of infrastructure to support them, the brine line, the intake, and getting a PG&E power drop. But we feel that we can accomplish those by July. Conceptually, this is sort of what it would look like. It's kind of a stare at this map for a little bit. This is the district's Pelican Way facility here. So we own this. This is just a nearby sort of vacant lot that was also considered as a potential site. So if we chose to situate it on this site to preserve our ability to use Pelican Way, you would have an intake pipeline running about 1,000 feet out in the bay to a screen. And then on the other side here, this darker green would be the brine disposal. So it would be disposed by mixing with the CMSA effluent. So we'd take that fresh effluent, which is fresh water, we'd mix it with the brine to kind of match it to the bay conditions, and then it would be sent out to their outfall. And we've, of course, got an environmental engineering study and report that shows the, you know, the studies that were done on the mixing zones and, you know, all of the technical data to support the fact that we wouldn't be harming the environment. And particularly so if this was a temporary facility. So this is the rough location with sort of Home Depot here and the Richmond Bridge down in the bottom right of the picture. The process itself looks something like this. It is fairly complex, as you can see, from intake screens to additional pre-screens before the UFMF, and then the filtered water tank and so on, moving through the process all the way through to even the ability to remineralize the water. And then, of course, we're pumping that water out into our distribution system. And you see the waste streams here going to the CMSA outfall. Mm-hmm. This is sort of a layout. It's just an engineering schematic showing how the containers are laid out. It's probably easier to see that in the photograph that we captured up front. This is just for one of them. We'd have about 3 of them. It's going to take about half of Pelican, if we were to use that site, it would take about half of Pelican Way. And then in terms of the costs, Director Schmidt, you were asking, so this is showing leased, but I think we would do an evaluation of you know, purchase versus leased, because I do think the purchase would actually possibly even be cheaper than leasing it. And we'll be exploring that as we go along. The point is, in the end, it's about a $35 million construction cost for the project.
And just to be clear, Paul, that's for the the short-term desal. It's not for the long
Yes,
term.
yes.
I think it's really important because there's been a lot of confusion about that in the
Yeah,
public commentary.
yeah. It's not the full-scale desal plant. That's more like 225 million. This is a short-term, 1-year operation.
Right.
To which you would add about $6 million to that capital cost. So it's about 41 million.
Right, to operate, right?
To operate.
So could you say that figure again for the longer term? Because
The longer term plan, we've just updated the costs on it. It looks like it's about 225 million. Yeah. But importantly, if we were to pursue this as the temporary stopgap for the drought, the schedule of 9 months that we have is just about doable. And of course, it doesn't preclude any long-term alternatives. I have a number of slides on the emergency intertie, but I know we're running short on time, so I'll speed through these. But here, I guess of note, we are working in a back and forth manner with Glen Colusa Irrigation District for an agreement for the purchase of option to purchase 15,000 acre-feet of water, and this could come to the board in the next month or so. Contra Costa have been working on our behalf and theirs, of course, with Yuba. And that looks like about a 10,000 acre-foot quantity. Contra Costa was targeting October 20th to go to their board with that agreement. And so that would be a secured water supply for us coming fairly soon here. In terms of project engineering, the technical feasibility is pretty much established at this point. Caltrans are reviewing some of the finer details about how we're going to connect to things. And we'll be pursuing and bringing to the board some contract amendments. And of course, the pre-purchase of materials is still scheduled for October 19th in order to meet our in-service date of July next year. Overall alignment, I think I've shown this to the board previously, but starting in Point Richmond here, connecting to the East Bay mud system, and the water kind of arrives at our Pelican Way site. So there are 2 1 million gallon tanks that are proposed to be there. It's been updated since this note was dropped in, and a pump station which would push the water out into our distribution system. And the eastern approach side here, shown in green, is in this triangle is the proposed pump station location, roughly speaking, in Point Richmond. And the pipeline would follow essentially a bike path alignment all the way through here. The pink shading shows Caltrans right of way. And so as we approach the bridge here and cross over, these are the Chevron pipes that you drive over. And our pipe needs to navigate through those. And so it's an elevated portion of the freeway here. And we would propose using that, this sort of overhang here to hang the pipe. And you can see the schematic here on the right showing how that pipe would be tucked up under this soffit. And we've done the engineering analysis to show that this concrete, the bridge structure, this freeway bridge structure can support the pipe. And that analysis has been provided to Caltrans, who are reviewing it. On the western approach, it's a little bit more straightforward. As we know, we land, come past the Rod and Gun Club, and we're in Francisco before hitting surface streets to Pelican, and you can see the rest of the alignment that I'm sure you all know fairly well. No major surprises here, just a number of right-of-ways that we need to navigate. And that's fairly normal construction for us. In terms of the bridge itself, a number of alternatives were looked at, but the 3 main alternatives were below the lower deck, which really doesn't seem to be feasible, largely because of a need for, if we change the clearance from the bottom of the bridge to the surface of the water, we're going to need a Coast Guard exception because it's a major navigable channel. And that process can take over 12 months. Alternative number 2 is underneath the upper deck of the bridge. And again, this does appear to be feasible. The analysis has shown that the different sections of the bridge can handle the piping at this point. And we're really in the design details of how things will be attached as opposed to whether they can be attached. Alternative 3 is the multi-use or bike lane. And again, it does appear to be technically feasible here. However, there are a number of operational and permitting challenges associated with the bike lane. Operational because the sort of zipper machine they use to move that movable barrier is very wide, and it actually occupies part of the space that we're proposing for the bike to be in. So so there's some challenges with that. And then as we look at some of the schematics underneath the upper deck, this is the challenge for us, is hanging it and suspending it from these big beams that cross and support the upper deck, and staying out of the traffic envelope, which is a 16'6" clearance. We're able to do that throughout the whole span. Alternative 3, again, this is conceptual drawing. If we were to push it onto the side of where the bike path is right now, in the worst case, we're looking at maybe a 10-inch incursion into the bike path. That's not to say that it lessens anybody's concerns over using the bike path, but it's just what we're able to do in terms of design, and that'll factor into our overall analysis as to which of these two options is the preferred option. Fiscal impacts. So we've been using a project estimate of between 60 and 90 million. And last week, I think Chuck showed us the $60 million sort of effect on rates and debt service requirements. And we can see those repeated here over a term of 30 years. The rate we'd be paying out at is about 4.06%. It's going to cost us about 2.9 million a year. And the rate increase that we would, think about having to support the project at this level is about 2.77%. And when we do that, really, we're not affecting our ability to use our CMF for our existing capital needs. So we're not cutting into our existing capital needs. And you see the relative numbers for the 90 million sort of upper range cost for the project, with the rate increase of about 4% there to support that level of investment. Timeline then, we're looking at bond financing for this. And so I think on the 21st, Chuck is talking about bringing on bond counsel, and then the bond sale, which is really the key date for the board, sort of a go, no-go date, is December 2nd. Oops, I skipped one there. So our key milestones, we're going to be bringing a number of agreements between now and November. October 5th, so we had an opportunity. We were able to move the authorization for full design from Tuesday to October 5th, just providing a little bit more time to refine what those costs are and just provide that time on the schedule for the board to think about and conduct any more planning that we need to. October 19th still remains firm in terms of the purchase of material. That's going to be pipes and the pumps. And then, of course, the bond sale that I just talked about. We're looking at an award of construction probably January or February at this point. Our next steps, we're going to continue pursuing both the desalination as we have been. We're talking with regulators and permitting agencies to prep that route. If a fatal flaw appears in the emergency intertie project, we can pivot as needed. And we'll be pursuing, as I say, the intertie project at full speed, bringing regular updates to the board along the way. And of course, with conservation, we're continuing our focus and efforts to develop those programs, adding incentives, and just really trying to drive down demand. And that's the presentation today.
Thanks, Paul. I'm afraid I also had a hard stop at 11, so I'm late. So I'm just going to say thank you for the presentation. I support all of the other measures moving forward to the board. And I'm just going to wish everybody a great weekend. But thanks again for the team for a very thorough presentation. And let's get these slides up online if they're not there already.
Thanks, and welcome back, Cynthia.
Thanks,
Yeah,
you guys.
thanks a lot.
Right.
Paul, could I ask a quick question on the, you were talking about purchasing that, the desal plant, the temporary plant.
Yeah.
Do you have a cost estimate for that?
So it's about 10.5 million is the preliminary number that I have right now.
10.5 million more?
No, $10.5 million to purchase it.
We don't know yet, Director Bragman, the exact difference in cost of lease versus purchase, but we're developing that and we'll be bringing that. It may not be significant, which is why we're talking about just purchasing.
Okay, and
And
the other,
does it come with new membranes and stuff?
If you lease it, it would be additional onto the purchase price that I just mentioned. As Ben said, we don't have the exact numbers. I mean, I can get ballparks, but it's better off
Okay.
for the actual.
Okay. Sorry, Larry.
it's okay, and there's probably public comment. I think we should move on to.
No, go ahead.
I have
You
a
had a
quick-
question?
I
Go
have a
ahead, Jack.
quick, just how are we doing status wise in our talks with Antioch on their desal?
So we've reached out, we chatted with the project engineer at Antioch. What we found is, I think that they're planning on a 6 million gallon a day capacity for their plant right now. But that they are sizing the intake and outfall maybe for twice that. But beyond that, we haven't had any further conversations.
Okay.
Well, I think we should press forward on that because, I mean, that is equal to the capacity you're talking about with this temporary plant. So
yeah,
another 6 MGD.
Yeah.
And I think through Los Vaqueros, it would be fairly easy, if there's a pipeline built on the bridge, it would be fairly easy to move the water to Los Vaqueros and then into the system.
Right, but it'd be less cost just to have our own smaller system, right?
No, because the operations cost is substantially lower for Antioch because the water's brackish as opposed to salt. It's much less salty.
Right, but
So
we have to build a pipeline to get it.
We have to get the pipeline. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's not an alternative to the pipeline. It's another option with,
Right.
it's not sticking a straw in the Delta.
Right,
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
except it kind of is, right?
Well,
You're diverting water
yeah.
from the delta. So yeah, there's no easy answers here, I don't think, folks.
That's true. And you still have the fish problems, the fish intake problems and all that kind of junk, which presumably they're addressing with their intake structure. I mean, they've had an intake structure there forever, I mean, back to the turn of the century. So they must have been hit with all of the fish issues. They must have screens that remove the fish and all that kind of junk.
Yeah.
Okay, any more board issues? Hearing none, can we get the public comment?
Sure, there are 3. First one, Marin Conservation League, then Frank Egger, please. Go
Good
ahead.
morning. Good morning again. It's Larry Minicus. So the question that wasn't asked is if you're pulling in 5.4 million gallons per day, will this be enough of a buffer if we go into a second and even third year of drought going into 23, 24? And the other issue here, looking at this from an environmental standpoint, is a pipeline would use tremendously less greenhouse gases over its lifetime than a small desal plant. And I think this has to be part of the calculation, both of these, as to what would be the better choice. And we do know that with the pipeline, we can turn it off. And we know with a desal plant, we can't. So I think all these considerations have to be taken in as you go forward. I know there's concern about fish. I know there's concern about the Delta. We're in a situation here. We have to look at the best of the not great options. And it does seem that the pipeline is really still by far the best option here. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry.
Mr. Egger?
Thank you very much. Frank Egger, Fairfax. You've covered an awful lot of ground today to try to respond to. On excavating reservoirs, when old dams are removed for salmonid restoration, one of the biggest problems is dealing with the amount of sedimentation that is built up behind the dams. If an existing reservoir is dredged to its original capacity, the state water board will allow it. You're not increasing capacity from the original design. Just a note on flooding on the Russian River. Both 2017 and 2019 were flood years on the Russian River. How things have changed in a couple of years, it's crazy. On desal, CMSA needs to build a reverse osmosis plant and reclaim their 12 million gallons a day of wastewater rather than dumping it into the bay with its pharmaceuticals, fluoride, and chloramine. Talking about water usage, currently, if it's 100 gallons per day per person, that's about 19,109 gallons per day of usage. If we could drop that to 25 gallons per day per person, it would be 4,775 gallons per day. And that's probably doable, 25 gallons per day, if you include gray water reuse and rainwater catchment. On the issue of CEQA, I haven't seen where the compliance with desal and the pipeline all show up. I'm not sure where the CEQA compliance is going to be dealt with. And then just lastly, quickly, Senate bills 8, 9, and 10 were signed by the governor yesterday. In Fairfax, Fairfax has 3% of the county's population is approving 10 to 20 accessory dwelling units up to 1,200 square feet annually. Marin Water does not require a water meter for ADUs. But with the new legislation, now property owners can legally split off their ADU lot, and Marin Water will be providing free water to the ADU lot because you're not requiring a water meter. Marin Water must start requiring water meters for standalone ADUs because they will be split up from the main metered lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Roberts?
Yes, good morning. I just want to make a comment and an observation. I've been doing some study of the 76-77 drought. And in that period, with a lower population, we were able to, in Marin, accomplish a target of 57 gallons per day per person. We're not anywhere close to that today. And so we need this pipeline, and it's an insurance policy. It's something we really can't avoid. It's the best choice of all the unfavorable choices facing us, particularly since we're not going to be achieving the savings rate that occurred in 1976 and 77, which was 57 gallons per day per person. We're not anywhere close to that.
Thanks, Roger.
We have one more last 4 digits, 8800.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Loud and clear.
Okay, great. Thank you. Nancy Okada, thank you very much for the presentation. And once again, kind of low-hanging fruit is water hookups, new water hookups. And I would just ask the board to reconsider putting a moratorium on new water hookups, because it's just putting another straw into the bottle, as you say. And it really, at this point in time, we can't afford any more new water hookups. So please consider that. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further comments.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on.
Chair, could I make
sure, of course,
suggestion on the matter of hookups? Could we get in the manager's report some kind of an update on hookups as we go forward? I think we would do a lot better if the public actually knew what the hookup numbers were on an ongoing basis.
That's a great suggestion. Ben, let's just incorporate that into the general manager's report on
Yeah.
a weekly or meeting by meeting basis.
Well, yeah, we'll do that. We do have some information there now, but we'll put it in a manner that brings the history and a bit more robust analysis. That'll be a good resting home for it.
Yeah, I just think more transparency, more information we can get out to the public would be very, very helpful.
Got it.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Item 6, award of contract number 1956 for furnishing and delivery of motor fuels.
Good morning, directors. Darren Machado, Acting Operations Director. I'm going to talk about motor fuels contract number 1956. This contract is for furnishing and delivery of motor fuels to district facilities. On August 11, 2021, the district released a notice inviting bids for a 4-year contract for the furnishing and delivery of motor fuels, with the option to extend the contract in 1-year increments for an additional 2 years. Sealed bids were opened by the district, and Western States Oil was identified as the lowest responsible bidder. The district has 2 fuel dispensing sites, the Corporation Yard in Corte Madera and Sky Oaks in Fairfax. Both facilities require frequent fuel deliveries to maintain operations. Approximately 84% of the fuel dispensed for the district's fleet is done at the Corporation Yard, and the other 16% is done at Sky Oaks. The 3 other delivery locations specified in the contract that require significant less fuel deliveries are for emergency generators. Ignacio Booster Station and Bontempi Treatment Plant currently have operational emergency generators in place. We added San Geronimo Treatment Plant, planning for the installation of a new emergency generator at that location. Staff is requesting that the Operations Committee review and refer this item to a future regular meeting of the Board of Directors to award contract number 1956 to Western States Oil in the amount of $2,105,440, or excuse me, $2,105,440.90. Staff is also requesting that the board authorize the general manager to execute any necessary amendments to this contract in an amount not to exceed 15% of the total contract amount.
Thank you, Darren.
Yeah.
What's the average price per gallon?
Right now, the price we used for this contract, just as a kind of a baseline, was $3.15 a gallon for unleaded.
And then they have an escalator in there or something?
Yeah, there's a differential price, and that's either up or down. And in this case, that differential's down.
Cool. Larry, Jack?
Nope, I have nothing. Sounds good to me.
Okay, can I get a motion to refer?
Darren, really quick question.
Yeah.
We were using biofuels at one point. Are we still using any biofuel?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, we were using renewable diesel, and we still are. We started in January of 2018 and currently have been using renewable diesel since then. We left ultra low sulfur diesel number 2 as a bid item for this contract in the event that renewable diesel isn't unavailable. But since we went to it in 2018, we have not had any supply issues with getting the renewable diesel.
So this does include renewable diesel?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a lot healthier for, using it for the guys working around, or I shouldn't say guys, but staff working around the machine. So, okay, thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
I move referral or whatever we need to do.
Yes.
Yeah, that's all we need to do. That's all we need to do.
Okay.
And there are
Item
no
7.
comments too.
Okay, go. Item 7, Peacock Gap Recycled Water Pipeline Request for Proposals.
Alex has this one, Director Russell.
Thank you.
Good morning, me again. So I'm here this morning to bring the request for proposals for the Peacock Gap Recycle Transmission project. The district owns and operates approximately 24 miles of recycled water transmission and distribution pipeline in the city and communities of San Rafael, Terra Linda, Santa Venetia, Los Ranchitos, and Marinwood. The recycled water system provides 1 million gallons of recycled water to our 300 recycled water customers in the northern area for the range of uses, including irrigation and toilet flushing. Since the expansion of the recycled water facility at the Las Colinas Valley Sanitary, the district is seeking to expand our recycled water distribution system to the Peacock Gap area of San Rafael to help capitalize on the increased output of the treatment plant. Supplying large consumers with recycled water will help reduce the demand. Pardon me? This will help reduce our demand to the district's potable water supply. So district staff issued a request for proposals on September 10th to various engineering consulting firms for the first of the two-phase design approach. The request for proposals in this first phase will involve evaluating 3 recycled water transmission pipeline expansion alternatives to the Peacock Gap area and provide the necessary environmental documentation. The findings of this first phase will be detailed in a final report with a recommendation for a preferred design route. Details of this report, along with the environmental documentation, will provide the district a competitive advantage for grant opportunities and is necessary to proceed with the second phase of design. District staff will be receiving proposals for this RFP on October 11th. District will reserve the option to continue working with the selected consultant for the phase 2 work involving final design, plan, specifications, and estimate. District staff will be making a recommendation for contract award for phase 1 at a future regularly scheduled board meeting. And I'll take any questions at this time.
Alex, yesterday I received an email from an attorney, I believe, who's on the city council for San Rafael, who represents Peacock Gap. He's requesting a phone call from me. I don't know why he picked me, but he did. And to discuss their interest in moving forward. He actually represents the golf course. So he brought up their $5 million offer previously. I don't know if there's any interest from the district in that, but I can't imagine there wouldn't be. So anyway, I don't know if you want me to go ahead and talk to him or if you guys want to make the call or whatever. So I need a little direction when you get a chance, not at this moment, but I think we do need to respond to his request. Anyway, I'm very happy to see we're moving forward with this. And let's look at some innovative ways of getting the water across the bay there, you know, not necessarily tearing up Central San Rafael and that kind of stuff. What's the projected, if everything went perfectly, what's the soonest?
What's the soonest we'd be able to get this project rolling if once we get the RFPs, do the evaluation, bring it to the board, go out. I would envision being able to go out for contract maybe by mid next year or sometime in the summer of 2022.
Construction.
For construction, correct.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, Larry, you had a question?
Again,
No,
this is, I just want to put in, this is also a funding issue, so we'll have to.
Yeah.
find
And that's
funding.
what I wanted to comment on. I'm amazed you guys have the bandwidth to do this. And I'm very pleased that you're presenting it. So I really, really appreciate it. But my comment was going to be whether the board should consider adding a dedicated portion to our CMF fee to cover recycled water on an ongoing basis so that we can continue to expand the system. So in other words, we would actually add some kind of a small amount of money to the CMF on an ongoing basis dedicated to recycled water, either expanding the system or even consideration of building a new plan at CMSA, which was recommended in public comment and which we've discussed before. So it's just a suggestion for the board to consider, staff to consider. I think it's an important project. You know, we've got the plant in Las Colinas, and I do think we need to move forward with, you know, optimizing the use and implementing the use of that capacity. So thanks for bringing it.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Jack.
I was going to say, I think this is a very positive move forward, and I am all for it. I have many times heard this, the Peacock Gap recycled effort as shovel ready. I'm not quite sure I know what that means, but if we're getting preliminary designs, it sounds like this is something less than shovel ready. Is that misleading? How close are we to this? I heard the timeline. Maybe we could have it as early as at least it'd be in construction by the middle of the summer. Do we have other projects that would fall at the about the same point that equally accessible is, I guess, what I'm asking? Yeah. Any other opportunities?
So Director, do you mean other water recycling opportunities?
Recycling.
I mean, there's other ones out there we've talked about before. This is the one that's most attractive, and this effort is intended to get it shovel ready. And the first step, and there was some discussion, is to really look at the alignment. There is a benefit of going through central San Rafael because we may be able to hook up additional facilities along the way. But that's really looking at the alternative routing, the benefits to the project, the costs and the impacts, and bring that to the board and decide on the routing. And then we move into full-scale design to get it shovel ready. We believe, since we'll be in design, we'll be able to aggressively go for grant funding once we kick this off, indicating that in the near term, it'll be shovel ready. So that's part of our intentions.
Okay. Right. Good. I'll move approval. Do we need an approval? Yeah.
This is a referral to the board.
Okay.
Do we want public comments if there are any?
Sure, of course.
There are none.
Okay, great. I think Larry's thought is a good one too, although it has the disadvantage of having to build something at CSMA to supply the water. But I never really thought about that actually, of going across the bay basically from the Rod and Gun Club straight to Peacock Gap. It is potentially possible. I mean, you come in above the San Rafael yacht harbor there.
Yeah, I don't mean as an alternative to this proposal. I just mean if we did implement a dedicated recycled water fee added to the CMF, so that we have an ongoing source of financing just to expand that recycled water part of our portfolio. So
that's a great idea.
Yeah.
That's a great
so
idea.
that was really what I was suggesting. And I've got to go. I've got to be in court pretty soon. So
before you leave, let me just throw one quick thing out to you. There's another possibility, which is to attach it as a fee for new connections, that we put that cost onto them. So that they have to come in with zero impact on the system, and they have to buy in and buy into this in light, or the thinking of the same as a CMF would be a different kind of CMF.
It's another way to do it. And I think everything's got to be on the table. So again, really appreciate it. And I got to say goodbye. So
I really appreciate your thoughts. Good luck in court.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Okay, guys. Number 8, Southern Marin Pipeline Replacement Project Phase 2.
Okay, Directors Jake Miller is going to present this item.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jake Miller, Associate Engineer from the Design Group.
Hi, Jake.
Hi. I'm here to present item for contract number 1937 for the second phase of Southern Marin Pipeline Replacement Project. This project will take place in the city of Belvedere and town of Tiburon. This project is a component of the district's capital improvement program, and it will install 530 feet of new pipe to replace approximately 1,750 feet of pipe that's leak prone and was installed as early as 1921.
Oh, wow.
So the engineer's estimate for this project is $200,000, and bids will be opened on Tuesday, September 28th. And the project is scheduled to last 100 days with a completion date of January 13th of 2022. If all bids are acceptable, staff will make a recommendation for contract award at a future regularly scheduled meeting. Staff recommends referral of this item to the board to proceed with the project. Any questions?
It looks good to me.
Looks good to me. I'll move referral to the board.
Check. Okay, perfect. All righty. Well, with that, we are
There are no
done.
comments.
Oh, public
There are
comment.
none.
Public comment. Okay.
There are no.
Okay.
Yeah, there are none.
Yeah, I heard you. Okay.
Oh.
I thought someone else spoke. So we're done. Thank you all, and we'll adjourn this meeting.
All right. Thank you all. Have a good weekend.
Okay.